had that you could download MP3s too. And so now the word podcast is thrown around. Nobody really knows in mainstream culture where that comes from. But anyway, so here it is. We are on episode 1861. So yeah, I've been doing it a long time. And this website is running in Azure, and I'm using a Blazor server. I'm using a Blazor server to write it. I wrote it in Blazor server with some CSS, and it's pretty simple. But I started thinking about a mobile app on the .NET show, and I know it's a little strange. It's supposed to be surreal with people talking animated. But I started building a mobile podcast app right here, you can see, in April 2021. And I've gotten part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, part 6, part 7, and you can see there's a lot of work that has gone into it. These are the GitHub repos where I started. So I started by using it just by doing the basic structure. I have this cheat sheet here that I'm going to use. This is the main audio library that I use, plugin.maui audio, right here by Gerald Versluis. And so this is great because it abstracts away all of the audio for all of the platforms. But what's not great about it is that on an iPhone, if you have it in vibrate mode, you're not going to hear anything. Whereas everywhere else, on Android devices, doesn't matter if you're in vibrate mode, you'll still hear it. But that's just one little nitpicky thing. I'm sure, hopefully it'll get fixed in the future. So anyways, you can see I got to version 2. So we're going to take this all the way to the App Store. Well, in version 3, I started with user stories. I want to create a playlist. I want to give it a name. I want the app to automatically persist my playlists. This is after I've gotten the basic stuff of, showing all the shows and the episodes and being able to play them. I want to be able to retrieve a playlist from mine and delete an existing playlist. Then I want to select one or more episodes to add to a playlist. I want to remove episodes from the playlist, basically manage the playlist. And I want to play the playlist. So that was in version 3. And in version 4, we add modal dialogues. We added a couple of things to it. Not modal. Modal dialogues came later. But we added a couple of things to the models, and then I updated it to .NET 7, and then here in version 6, part 6, is when I really made it. I fixed a lot of bugs. I had published it to the App Store, and I asked people to beat on it and tell me what they think. There was actually a hidden bug that I put in there as a sort of a treasure hunt. And, for people who had the right answer of this, I think was the most heinous bug, I gave them an award. So that actually happened, and I'm going to show it to you now. So here is the app running on Windows. It's easy to see it running on Windows, obviously. How many people are using MAUI right now? Okay. So there are 2 ways to build a MAUI app. You can use XAML, and you can use Blazor. I chose to use Blazor. And it's not because I like the web. In fact, JavaScript and I have a long, tumultuous relationship. But I really got into Blazor because of the programming model. It was easy, it was powerful, and Microsoft was putting a lot of resources into it. Plus, Steve Sanderson is a freaking genius. So I'm going to show you how, and I think using Blazor for MAUI is the best way to go. So anyway, let's take a look here. I'm showing the first 20 episodes because I don't want to show all 1,800 of them. And if you click this More button, it goes and gets the next 20. But another thing you can do is filter. So I can say I want to see all the shows that have the word Azure in it. And as I'm typing, it goes and gets the first 20 episodes that have Azure in the title. And if you click More, now you're getting the next 20 or whatever episodes that have Azure in the title. And if there's more than 20, you'll get more again. And this time I know there's not 20, so you won't. Oh yeah, I guess you will. Oh, I think there's 42. So there you go. Now we finally get down to episode 403, published in 2008. That was the first time the word Azure appeared in a title. But you see now the More button is not there. And just to show you this running on different formats, I'm going to switch over to the Mac. And this is the app running in a Mac, in an iPad simulator right here, which is kind of cool. And if we go back to this guy, Windows, I've got my Galaxy here and linked to Windows. Whoops. And I have it running here as well. So I wish I could make this bigger for you, but you know, all the same features are here, right? So what happens when we click one of these guys is we get to a page that has the, you know, the controls for playing. It's basically, and these buttons probably need to be clarified a little bit, but the leftmost button that's grayed out is go back 10 seconds. Then play, pause, stop, and go forward 10 seconds. So here, I will, let's just play it. Now it downloads. We're going to get an ad here, I'm sure. Maybe not. Oh, that's awesome. I love it when things work, you know? Let's go back to Windows here, because it's just so much easier to demo. What is my default audio set to something else? Yeah, that's it.
Once a month, you get access to a private
All right, so there
RSS
you go.
feed where all the shit.
So I can skip ahead.
Soul Master Class. Raffle. The grounding. Dirty.
Hey, guess what? It's time for .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. And I'm Richard Cat.
So there you go. So that heinous bug that I was telling you about happened because I was putting all of the audio programming and stuff inside this page, this details page. And what would happen is you could have, in Blazor, you can have two instances of the same page running at the same time. Especially if you've got resources like timers or something like that. In this case, it was a timer. But I would start playing and go back. When it was downloading, I would go back and select another thing to play. And so now we have two shows playing at the same time. So what I decided to do is move all of that goo for playing audio into a singleton, into a single place. And that way we only have one show or episode playing at a time. We're getting the metadata from an API. It's a public API. It's read-only. There's no way that you can send updates or adds to it. So it's sort of like an RSS feed, but RSS doesn't have stuff for like guests and links. So I decided to create an API with models for the guests and the links and the description and all of that stuff, and the file, obviously. So this is the details page, and I can go back now to the home page. And playlists are a really cool feature, as I was telling you before. I can add a playlist, and let's just call it Azure. That's fine. This, by the way, is a modal dialog that I'm using Blazored modal. Does anybody know what that is? Blazored modal? Yeah. So there's this guy, Chris Sainty, who's from UK. And when Blazor was first hitting the scene, he just got busy writing all these tools for it. And Blazored modal is one that has become the de facto standard for modal dialogues. It just wraps CSS and HTML and does some tricks, right? So if I click in the background here, it will go away. But you can also specify that you want to disable that. And you can disable the X button if you want to. And you basically can use any HTML and CSS and JavaScript you want in your modal dialogues. You can pass data to them. You can bring data out. I also wrote this list box here. And let me switch back to this guy, and I'll show you why that's really important. Where am I? Link to Windows. There I am. All right, so if I go to playlists here and I add a playlist, Azure. If this was a regular select in HTML, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but they don't work well on phones. I might have 100 items in a list box, or even 3 items, and it shows as a drop-down. And you have to click on it to expand it, and then some other UI pops up. And it doesn't really work all that well, especially if there's only one in it. You can't select it. So here I'll add another JavaScript. And now you can see I've got 2 items in my list. So I basically built a custom list box in Blazor as a Blazor component. And that's what you're seeing here. So now if I've selected a playlist, which I have, and you can see there, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do zoom it here. If I have zoom it, I don't know if I have it. All right, sorry about that. So now that I have, you can see the 0 right there because there's 0 items in the playlist. So I'll go back, and now you can see my UI has changed. I've got some more buttons here. So now I can search all the shows that I want to put in the playlist, and I can just search for Azure, and I can add all of those shows to the playlist right here, or I can go manually through and add them all. What I'm going to do is get all the shows that have Azure in the title again with more, and just go through this process until they're all on the screen. And there we go. And now if I do plus all, and I go back to my playlists, now I've got this other cool UI thing, and this works well on a mobile device as well. These are all the shows that are in that playlist, and I can move them up and down in the playlist with these arrow keys. And they're big enough so that you can use your fat fingers to move them. So like if I want to move Azure API Management with Tom Kirkova to the top, I can just click this button right here. Okay? And now you can edit the name of the playlist, you can delete it, and all that stuff. So if I go back here to the main, and I show the playlist, it crashes. No, that's not true. So now here they are. I have 72 in the playlist, and I can start playing. And what's going to happen is it'll play each one of them, and when it's done, it'll go to the next one. And might have some bandwidth issues or something here, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's what's supposed to happen. Let's take a look at this. In the CS proj file, you can see I've got my target frameworks. I'm targeting everything. Android, .NET 7, iOS, .NET 7 Mac Catalyst, and also Windows. I've got some resources here, some images. Here's my Blazor modal, Newtonsoft JSON, of course, we wouldn't leave home without it, and plugin.maui audio. So those are the things that I'm using. And again, I'm going to go to my cheat screen here and did the packages I talked about, plugin MAUI. All right, I guess we can get into the code. Media state. So media state is this enum that I have. And the reason that I have that is because the plugin for audio, it just has an is playing property. So it really only gives you whether it's stopped or playing, or paused or playing. We don't really know if it's paused or stopped. And I also wanted to know if I was downloading, so I just created this little enum, and I used that instead. Here's something interesting. In XAML, if I'm on Windows, I want to center and size the window. And this is something that you really couldn't do, and you can't do it with XAML in a MAUI app, the way you can, say, in WPF. In WPF, I can just say position, center, width, and height, or whatever, no problem. But in MAUI, you don't have that control, even in XAML. So what I have to do here is some code. I have to handle in create window, I override that. And then I get that, I hook up the created event in the destroying event. I do my cleanup in destroying, but in created, I have this pragma here. If I'm running on Windows, then I grab the window, I set the default width and height, or I set the width and height of the window and the X and Y. And then I have to do this window.x and window.y right here. I think I did this just to move it off the screen. I'm not sure why. I don't think I have to do that anymore. But anyway, this is just code that I had to do in order to get it to pop up in the right place if I'm running on Windows. But here's a little tip for you guys. I don't think the Windows MAUI has a future. I don't think that the Windows platform on MAUI has a future. And I don't know. This is something that I've sort of inferred from talking to various people. But I kind of, don't think that it's going to be around much longer. And the problem is, well, which Windows platform do we choose? It's kind of nice if you just have a mobile app and you want it to run in Windows. But if you're going to write a Windows app, it should be a WPF app. I don't even like UWP anymore. I think WPF is still the way to go. That said, you could still write a WPF app with Blazor if you wanted to. It just goes everywhere. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, just blurt them out. You're not going to bug me by interrupting me. All right, so the next thing let's talk about is the service, API service. So what this does is wraps this podcast API. And as I said before, it's a read-only API. It doesn't require any authentication. It's public. And you could go there right now and grab all the metadata for all of our episodes. But this API service I use because it does other things than just going and fetching shows. I have get online status here, which is interesting because I need to know if I'm online or offline. See, one of the cool features that I wanted to put in this podcast app is if we're online, we can download particular songs. We can sort of pre-download them, right? And they go in the cache. And so when we're offline, if I've already downloaded them, I can listen to them. So I can download the shows I want to listen to, maybe in a whole playlist. You can download an entire playlist. Get on a plane, turn off the internet, go into airplane mode, and I can pull this up, and then I can still listen to them. That was a very important feature for me. So then you see when I have like get all shows, for example, I'm looking for a file in my cache directory, and this is how you access that cache directory in MAUI, filesystem.current.cache directory, because it's different on every platform. and I'm looking for this JSON file. So if we're online, this is great. We have an internet connection. I'm going to download the shows as usual, and just with a HTTP client, getting my list of shows, and I'm writing them to that file. If that file exists, I don't care. This is the current source of truth. I'm going to write over it. But if I'm not online and the file exists, I'm going to load it up and return all those items in the list. So there you go. I can, once I've downloaded it once, I'm in airplane mode or whatever, I'm offline, boom, I just read them from the file, the last list that I got. And if we're offline and the all shows JSON does not exist, it's the first time we've run it and we're offline. Sorry, Charlie, no shows. So now I have the filtered shows, right? Where with the show title, which is a partial title. Let's say it's Azure, because that's what I did. And I have a start index and a count. Well, the start index, one of the first things I do is I call get show numbers. And get show numbers will return just a list of the show numbers from 1 to 1856 or whatever. And that's kind of cool because I need to know how many shows there are in the database, right? And so this is telling me, okay, my start index and the maximum that I want to return. And again, if we're online, then we call this get filtered shows API. Otherwise, we're checking for the existence of each show's JSON file, right? So you can see the files are named show dash whatever. If it's show 1800, show-1800.json. So that will have all the details for that particular show. And that's kind of cool. Yeah, get count. How many shows are out there? And get filtered count as well. Offline, online. So here's getting show with details, right? So show-1800.json is my file name. If we're online, here's the URL right there. Show name is always .NET Rocks in this case, but for our other shows, you could say which show it is. And all right, so show and episode. I should really call this episode number, but I started this database way back in 2004, maybe 2004, 2005. No, it was around 2004. And that's just what I used. And I also used the table sponsors instead of what I should have had was ads, because I was thinking, well, why would a sponsor have more than one ad? That's crazy. So anyway, you'll see the word sponsor in the code. It really means an ad, and the word show really means an episode. Sorry about that. I just never changed it. So this is all the same stuff, right? If the file is offline, we grab it, we get the guests, we return the show. Here's get show numbers. All right, so you can see this is just your basic wrapper, but I do have all the online and offline stuff built into it. Let's look at the models, yeah. So I've got a models folder. Now this folder has models for the database tables like show and guest and file and link, tag, sponsor, which is really ad, show details, which has the guests, the links, the sponsors, the tags, the files, all of that in one wrapper. And then I also have playlist. And so playlist is something that I introduced for the app. As you could say, the name, the date created, and the list of shows. It's pretty simple. And I implemented iClonable so that I could easily make copies of it. And then I have this enum playlist edit action That's just for the UI if I'm adding or editing. I also have this get by show numbers request. So in the API, if I want to get a list of shows by their numbers, so let's say I load the app and I get the first 20 episodes. So now I want show numbers, the next 20 episodes. I know what those show numbers are. So I make this call. Here's the show name. Here's my list of indexes or show numbers. So that's models. In WebRoot, I've got all of my graphics and the logo. I have my little loading spinner GIF right there. And these are just those stupid big buttons right there. Here's the thing. In main layout, so main layout in a Blazor app is the layout for it's sort of like the master page, right? For every page that you're going to see, we want the nav menu, which goes across the top. We want the DNR logo. And this class right here is a CSS class. And get this, this is the last bug that I fixed. DNR logo. It's down here. I had a height, or max height is 40% or something like that. And that was fine on Windows and Mac Catalyst and Android. But I looked at it on, and this is currently the one in the App Store, I looked at it on iOS and it was all squished. So that fixed that. So yeah, main layout, simple. I don't show any nav menu on the side. The nav menu is actually across the top. And that's what this is right here for home and playlists. And you can see that. You can see the same thing on the website too, right here across the top. Probably the most interesting thing is the cascading app state. So anytime you want to have, in Blazor, you want to have a component that's sort of global to the application, and then certainly in MAUI, it's scoped to the application. In a website, it's scoped per user. So it's a great place to put state information for that particular user. If you've done web forms in the past, like the session object, right? So this is how you do it. You have a cascading value and some child content here. And the child content is a render fragment. And so now, if I go down to my main razor, I wrap the entire router, which is basically every page that you see, in a cascading app state. And you can see Blazor Modal does the same thing. And what that allows us to do is access this app state, this class right here, which is the code behind for it, in any page. So if I go to my pages index, Razor CS right here, now I can use the cascading parameter attribute and I get access to that app state. And in the app state is where I'm doing everything. I'm keeping the state for the entire application. The episode filter, right? You can see show playlist only text, last show number, all shows, which is the list of shows. Like everything that I have pretty much in the app is going in app state. I'm injecting the API service right here. This iAudio manager is the plugin.maui.audio.iAudio manager. And you can see I've got an iAudio player. I got a file stream, and this is cool because there's only one. It's like there can only be one. What is that? Highlander, right? There's only one app state. Only one file can play at a time. Only one file stream. Only one timer. I got my media state. I've got an episode or a show called This Show. That's the current one that we're looking at. The show number. Now I've got these properties that when I change them, I want the UI to update. And so that's why I'm invoking state has changed. And because cascading app state wraps everything, the values cascade down to whatever the page is. So if I call, where am I? If I call invoke async state has changed after I set a value, right, like audio message, and that audio message is bound to something on my page, it's going to update, no matter where I call it from. No matter where I call it from. So an audio message might be downloading, playing, paused, or an error. Here's a playing playlist, and I'm going to need that in the UI because I can use that to in index, for example, when I want to play something. If let's go into the markup for index and search for playing playlist app state. Yeah, so that's it. So I'm looking in app state.thisShow. If it's not null and the media state is playing, then what I do is I play this, I show this button, but it's predicated on this app state value. And so if that value changes, state has changed, updates it, index says, oh, this value has changed, I'm going to re-render this page and either show or hide this button. But take a look at what happens when I do this. This is the shut up function. And this was one of the things that I learned from a listener.
How'd you like to listen?
All right, so if I go back home now,
Easy.
there it
Become a
is,
patron
currently playing.
for just $5 a month.
And if I click it, it calls the shut up function. Right? So that was that button right there. But that's a really good example of how you can use a combination of cascading app state or a cascading parameter to store the state of an application and state has changed to do stuff that your UI can respond to. And you just do it with these little @if signs. So yeah, so now I have the search shows, and that's easy with an input where I'm bound to episode filter. And if I'm loading, then I show that loading GIF. If my selected playlist is not null, then I show all the UI that has the playlist GUI, the buttons for toggle, show the playlist only, add all to playlist, remove all from playlist. Like, it's all pretty easy to do. And I don't know, I find it much easier than XAML. And there are just some things that I can't really do in XAML, right? So let's go to, I'm back in the app state here. I'm looking at percentage of the audio played used to set the progress bar value. The play position is the current position. It's just a string. I use these opacities to control whether a button looks enabled or disabled. So that's an easy way. I can take an image and just using opacity show it like half opacity for disabled. And so therefore I had to manually deal with the state of those buttons based on whether we're playing or not playing, right? And so I have this set state. What is it? Set state. So this changes the UI. This doesn't actually change the audio player or anything like that, but I look to see if my media state is playing, and I set my opacities and my audio message, and I also am using these class names, right? And this is a cool thing that you can do with Blazor and CSS, is that I can dynamically change classes, CSS classes for a given element based on a state. And so that's what I'm doing here. Pause button class, stop button class, and then if we look in, let's see, details, which is where the player is. So here's image, class equals appstate.rewind button class, right? So I'm actually dynamically changing the CSS class based on the state. And if you look at the CSS, and we've got now, let's go, oh, it's up. Okay, it might not be in there. It's in details razor.css. That's right. We can have scoped CSS in Blazor. So you've got image button and image button active. And if the class is image button, that means I have these CSS values set. Otherwise, I don't. So that's how I do that. So back to this state, if I'm paused or stopped, then I have these other classes, play button class. So this image button, basically, it's cool. When you press it, it kind of depresses a little bit and then comes back out. It's nice. Then I set some other values. Okay, so not much there. So let's go to play audio. Play audio is what happens when you press the button to play. So if we're paused, I want to continue playing from where I am, right? If we're currently paused and you press play, I don't want it to go back to the beginning. I want it to continue where we are. And then I call set state media playing. So if there's no URL specified, right, this show MP3 URL has to have a URL, right? And I'm making sure we're stopped by calling this cleanup, which I'll get to in a minute. But it's sort of like the end of life for that player. Everything gets disposed, timer or whatever. So I get the cache dir, the fully qualified path to the local file, right, the MP3 URL. And then I get the local file name, and if it exists, if it doesn't exist, I'm going to let the user know we're trying to download. Then I go get it. Then I open the file for reading, and I create my player, my audio player, from the stream, right? And then I hook this playback ended event. That happens when it ends. I create the system timer to report the progress, 50 milliseconds. And now I have this timer elapsed anonymous method. Calculate the percentage. Then I get some time spans from the current position and the duration, and I create this play position string. And that basically shows where we are. When I start the timer, I start playing, I set the media state, and invoke state is changed. So then cleanup. Let's talk about cleanup. Not you. You. So cleanup happens at the end of life. I found that I had to do this little await task delay 100 or else weird things happen. You know, programming used to be, I'm old, programming used to be you were a surgeon. You know, you got control of the machine. You did exactly what you told it to do, exactly what you wanted. It did that, and then you released control. Now you're more like a psychologist. You know, you have a conversation with the machine. You know, you make some suggestions. You listen, you make some suggestions. You observe the behavior. You prescribe some medication. You know, it's just one of those things. It's like, what's going on here? I don't really understand it, but I know that maybe if I give it a little time to do what it needs to do, because we're in an async world here, it'll work. So I wait for 100 milliseconds. Then I say stop, or I set the state to stopped. If the stream is not null, I dispose it. If the timer's not null, I stop and dispose. I probably don't need that. Stop, I can just dispose it. I unhook my events and dispose the player, and that's pretty much it. So I want to jump over to the Mac here for a minute to talk about the joy that is programming MAUI and testing it in the Mac. You can see here that I've got this iPad, right? But what if I want to run this, and I'm doing this from the command line, what if I want to run it on a particular device simulator? So what you have to do is if I go to Xcode, And apparently Xcode isn't there anymore. I don't know why. Okay. Well, anyway, if you go to Xcode and simulators, you can see from the list of simulators there's a device ID. And you can put that device ID in a command such as this. So .NET build -t : run -f net 7.0 iOS and then p -p : device name equals v2 UDID equals, and then that GUID that is the ID for that device. Simple, right? And when you do that, everything's built. And by the way, this is how I like to test on a Mac. I basically clone the repo. You know, I push my changes to the repo over here on the PC. I go and pull and get the latest, and then I can use .NET Run on the particular device. And as you can see, it runs there. So this is on an iPhone device. Now I can also, going back here, use a thing called hot restart with my local iOS device. And when I do that, and I'm sorry I don't have the actual screen on the screen. Okay, well, I don't know what that is, but anyway, it would tell me, okay, go run the app now on your phone. And it is the app-ish, but it's not really. It's running in a sort of a shell that you can use to debug, and it's great. But and you can use the application, right? Like I can go download stuff and play, and because I have it in vibrate mode, it doesn't play, but it's downloading. And now you'll hear it.
Nye briller kan være hårdt for budgettet. Men vælger du et brilleabonnement fra Synoptik, kan du få nye briller uden at betale noget i dag.
I don't know, is that a condom ad? I don't know. It's funny because we're using Spreaker, which is iHeartRadio's network for podcasts. And we went to this thing where they basically inject local ads before, in the middle, and after the podcast. And it could be anything. And I was talking to Bill Wagner. Do you know who he is? He's a Microsoft guy who writes documentation. He's been around for a long time. I was visiting him in Maine, and he goes, I was listening to .NET Rocks, and I get an ad for like a local supermarket, like right here in my town. I was like, yeah, well, geo-targeting. It's weird. But it's kind of strange to hear those ads on .NET Rocks, but there you go. So we've shown it on Android. We've shown it on iOS. Oh, Mac Catalyst. That was the other one. So Mac Catalyst is a Mac app, right? Right there. If I use Net 7.0 Mac Catalyst, that will load as a Mac desktop app. Right? Windows, Mac desktop, iPad, iOS, Android. So it's all running. And believe me, that is a chore, a feat that I didn't really have a lot of confidence up until, maybe 3 or 4 years ago that I'd be able to do that in a demo. Using Xamarin, it was just really hard to get all of these things working. It's such a moving target. But I found that on the Mac, you have to not only have the current version of the operating system installed, but the current version of Xcode, which I'm really not sure why I can't see it. But the current version of Xcode running, the current version of .NET, and the MAUI workloads, and all of that stuff, and it changes. And if there's a new version, you have to reinstall everything. And on top of that, you have to, if the license agreement for your Apple developer account changes, before you can even use it, your own phone, before you can use it, you have to go agree to their terms, or else it won't work. And you have to provision a device for development on your own machine, your own device, just so that you can run your app like this. Requires that you pay $100 a year and you register your device and all that stuff. Okay, so that's the end of my rant against Apple. We love Apple, right? I actually do, and the reason is Apple is secure. I'm a security freak these days. And you say what you want about Apple, but your iPhone is locked down. This is one of the ways in which it's locked down. It might not be as convenient, but it's secure. Whereas Android, that's kind of the Wild West. You know, you can do a lot more with Android. Okay. Here's one thing that you need to know about Android. Check this out. So you get a new Android device and you want to use it for debugging. You have to go to Settings, go to About Phone, and I'm sorry I can't make this bigger. Can I do? Oh, yeah, I can. Look at that. Go to About Phone. Go to, is it serial number, product number? Software information, the build number. Where is it? Build number. And you tap 7 times on the build number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. See how what it says? Developer mode has already been turned on. And that's how you turn on developer mode. You have to tap on the build number 7 times. I swear to God. And then, security through obscurity. And then you get in Settings, Developer Options, right down at the bottom. And you have to turn on Enable USB debugging. Where is it? USB debugging right there. Right there. You have to turn that on. And then, when you connect, you have to install the Samsung driver. This is what I have, a Samsung. Or whatever your phone is. If it's Google, you have to download the USB driver for Windows. And then, once you connect, it's going to ask you, do you want to allow USB debugging? Now, you've already said you wanted to allow USB debugging. You have to trust the computer and say, I want to allow USB debugging on this computer. So all of that has to happen before you can get Android local devices, in your list of devices. So it is a moving target. But I got to say, though, Blazor makes it easy, and certainly MAUI is a lot easier right out of the gate than Xamarin ever was. They really have put a lot of effort into making the developer experience excellent. Any questions? Is there anything that I haven't shown you that you want to know the answer to? Anybody? Don't be shy. Yes, in the back.
I have a Xamarin app today.
You have a what?
A Xamarin app.
Okay, Xamarin app.
I think very often I have to do something special for iOS.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You want to take the mic? Here you go.
Today I have a Xamarin app, and I think very often I have to do something special for iOS and something other special thing for Android to get things to work. How is it with the MAUI platform?
How what? What's the question?
Yeah, how often do we have to do something special to get iOS to work and something other special to get Android to work?
Yeah, I have a suggestion for you. Google and Apple have to merge. Who buys who, though? That's the question. No, it's very frustrating because, they are 2 different companies with 2 different platforms and different requirements. And as I said before, Apple is a lot more interested in security, right, for their users and for their platform. They do a lot more to vet applications that you submit to the App Store. Yeah, I went through one of the things that I did in my shows here on the .NET show is I did a whole series of, where is it? Publishing apps, right? So I started from creating an account on the Google Play Store and the Apple Store, and I did videos of this and everything that you have to do to publish an app. And it's very different for both platforms. And this gets right to the heart of your question and really your outpouring of frustration of having to develop on these two platforms. The development part is easy, really. There are some things that you're going to see a lot different in the XAML versions, but when you're using Blazor and CSS, those differences go away. I think it's a lot easier to develop in Blazor is what I'm saying, and you get a more consistent look and feel, and the way they behave, the way the apps behave if you're using Blazor. Because CSS is and the browser is already the platform, cross-platform, right? And it's been debugged and worked on by the browser manufacturers already for years and years and years. Whereas Microsoft, for XAML, has to do implementations of every little feature of their UI differently for iOS and for Android, and they're always playing catch-up. And stuff just doesn't work. I'll tell you right now. Having, what was it? I had a scrollable container list view or something like that. Collection view, that was it, a collection view. And trying to do, fine-grained positioning of items in a collection view just doesn't work in XAML. Whereas, and it just took a lot of work, it took a lot of guesswork. I even asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT's like, heck if I know. It said like this, just like the documentation said it should work, and it didn't work. But in Blazor, I was able to make it work very quickly. So yeah, I feel your frustration. I wish I had a better answer, but ultimately, that's what's got to happen. Apple and Google have to be the same company. Anybody else? Yeah, right here. 5 minutes? Do you want you want the microphone? Yes, thank you. Great.
Hi, thanks, Carl. You say really, really interesting things. By example, what you think about the future of UWP and the Windows platform and apps. I'm just thinking people starting now if you are already working with Blazor, by example, is it at this time a great moment to go to mobile with the .NET MAUI, or should we wait until the progressive web apps will be completely installable? We are already there. Is it the time to invest in learning MAUI, knowing that PWAs are there already and can be installed on your Windows and whatever?
Yeah, that's a great question, Denny. Like I said, it's been my experience, and I've lived through all of these things. I've lived through Silverlight. I've lived through, UWP and in Windows 8 applications, Metro applications, and there's always seems to be some sort of UI that's specific that we should code to. I'm here to tell you, man, Blazor is the new 42. It's the answer to everything. Because it runs everywhere. It runs on mobile, it runs on Windows, it runs on Mac desktop. You can write a WPF application with Blazor. You can write a Windows Forms application with Blazor. What else is there? And you're going to have a consistent UI experience for each one of those things. And I wouldn't worry about performance, because the web view control, which is what makes this all possible, is sort of like that phone gap, Cordova idea, where you're running it in a very lightweight browser container, right? And yes, it's going to use more memory because you have the Edge Chromium engine running, but the amount of memory that it's using is probably insignificant compared to your application. And what can I say? I'm not a fan of UWP just because it locks you into that particular way of working. And I know that there are frameworks that have come out for mobile that use UWP, and go everywhere. But you know, the web is the web, and it's free and it's open, and all the browser manufacturers support it. And Blazor is certainly not going anywhere. Yeah, not just for WebAssembly, which we're not even using Blazor for WebAssembly. We're just using the Blazor component model, which has great binding, it has great eventing, and I've been using it for years now, ever since it came out, and I just love it. I hope that answers your question. No, it doesn't? No? Is now the time to start looking at UWP? Is that what your question is?
Maybe I asked my question wrong. My question was, should I look into .NET MAUI with Blazor mobile bindings like this, or should I just focus on complete Blazor applications and knowing that there will be PWA installed, because you can already install Blazor
PWA
applications.
installed.
So should
Yeah.
I pronounce it wrong maybe? So
it's
should
your
I
goal to
combine
write-
Blazor with .NET MAUI or just do Blazor?
Is your
and
goal
install
to
it
write
everywhere?
a mobile app or an app that goes everywhere?
Everywhere.
You want an app that goes everywhere, right? The same, yeah. Well, you can do it either way, right? Obviously, making a mobile app and putting it in the App Store has requirements. You have to update it. It's not as easy as just having a PWA. Problems with PWAs are that, well, Safari is better now, but up until, a few months ago, you couldn't do notifications with PWAs with Safari, right? So there were limitations. It's getting better now, and I kind of like the PWA idea because it is just like it's sort of the best of both worlds, right? But it has its challenges also. Yeah, how do you get people conditioned to the idea that they have to go with their browser to something and then find in Safari the, install on desktop, right? I mean, that whole process isn't very intuitive. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, but that's the state of affairs right now. All right, one more question.
Hello.
Yeah.
I have a question. Like, would you recommend that for production, like for big apps?
I'm sorry. Can you speak up in the mic?
Could you recommend that for production? Will you recommend that for production for big apps, right? That we release this MAUI, right? Would you recommend that?
What do I recommend for in production for
like
big apps?
Yeah, big enterprise apps, mobile apps that we build.
Enterprise apps.
Yeah. What's like comparison in performance regarding like React Native, for example? Should we go with that platform instead, right?
Are you talking mobile apps?
Yeah.
Enterprise mobile apps.
Yes.
Yeah,
And last question, like, can you run Blazor libraries inside of this? For example, Mod Blazor,
Can you run Blazor libraries? I'm sorry, what?
like Mod Blazor. Do you know Mod Blazor?
Yes.
Can you run that inside?
Yes, yeah. In fact, Blazor Modal is a third-party library. So yeah, anybody's, DevExpress, Telerik, whatever, or Mud Blazor, you can run those inside your mobile apps if you're using Blazor. Absolutely. What would I recommend? I think that it depends on the culture of the enterprise, right? If you're going to customers like apps that are in the App Store. That's all there is to it. If you're in the enterprise and you want to, support everybody, all your employees, then maybe just a regular Blazor application, web application is a good idea. Maybe with some PWA, a PWA version of it. I think that's obviously easier, right? Because you only have one code base and your employees just expect, I can just go to this web page. I have a Blazor WebAssembly PWA that I wrote for my family, my kids, because I have this slideshow that runs on a big screen in my kitchen area on the mantle. And it's a WPF app, but it's connected via SignalR to a server. And I have a PWA app that they all install, and they can see what the current picture is. They can upload pictures, and then everybody sees it, and all of that stuff. And it works just fine. It's a WebAssembly PWA. It's a simple app, but it works just fine. So that I would think is akin to the enterprise solution where you're building an app for your employees, right? Whereas if it's for customers, I think they expect an app in the App Store. All right? Good? Happy? Thank you very much. Have a good day.